Hey everybody, this is the fourth here, and in this video I'm going to take an in-depth look and show you how to use the base stab presets, the patcher base stab presets from my new preset pack, which is called FL Studio Base Stabs. So I'm going to start off by taking a look at the sub-base presets. And if you're using FL Studio 12, you might notice that things look a little bit odd when you first load up the presets, and I think this is because I made them in FL Studio 11. They work just fine and they sound exactly the same, but visually, sometimes when you first load it up, the window might not be the right size, so you just have to adjust the window, and you can see the names of the parameters kind of get cut off. And to fix that, all you have to do is right click somewhere that isn't on a parameter and hit edit, or you can just click this little wrench icon up there and then just right click one of the parameters, hit rename, and hit enter right away, and you'll see all the full names pop up, and then you can turn edit off by clicking that, or again by right clicking. So now that I've mentioned that, I'll get to explaining the presets. So you will notice that each of these presets kind of has, one or two alternate versions. And the alternate versions are, something in the, how I put together the preset was changed, but it's slight enough that it didn't justify considering it as a new preset, because really it's completely the same except for a small change. So in the case of the two sub-base presets, this change is in Citrus. So the difference between the sub-base presets is, if I go into the map on the Citrus, the sub-base 1 has the original volume envelope in filter 1. And so you can see operator 1 is modulating itself. So that modulation is just a steady modulation in sub-base 1. But if we look at sub-base 2, you can see operator 1, the volume envelope is there instead of on filter 1. So the modulation is actually affected by that volume envelope. And it's a very subtle difference, but you should be able to hear it. So here's sub-base 1. And here's sub-base 2. So it's quite subtle, but it is noticeable. And it doesn't really matter which one you use, just whatever sounds best to you. So now I'm going to go over the different parameters, and they are pretty self-explanatory. Decay time is just the decay time of the sub-base. So you can have quite a long decay. You can almost even use this as like an 808 if you wanted to. Or you can have a pretty, short, quick, stabby sound. Or somewhere in between. So the next parameter is the wave shape, and this actually determines how much that operator 1 modulates itself. So if I turn the distortion mix off, you'll be able to hear this better. You can hear it kind of has a fair amount of harmonics from that modulation, and that's what this knob does. So if I turn it all the way off, there is no frequency modulation, and you really just have a sine wave bass. But as I turn that up, you get more of that modulation and more harmonics. And these are saw wave harmonics pretty much. And then of course you have the distortion mix, which is the mix level of the distortion. So you can hear that better if I turn the wave shape off. And you also have the distortion pre-gain, which determines how much of that sound is going into the distortion. So you can use these three parameters to really change the character of that bass. And get just the kind of sub bass stab that you want. So the next parameter is the filter cutoff, and this is a key mapped filter. So you can hear kind of as I play different notes. The filter goes up with those notes. But this is another way you can filter off the high frequencies, so you can have a more subby bass or a more harmonic rich bass. So all the way up it sounds like this. But as I turn it down, it will filter off more and more of the high frequencies. So that's pretty nice. So next up, the output level is just the final output level after everything. And you also have compression. So I'm going to turn the distortion off so you can hear that better. So if I turn the compression all the way down, it's just the uncompressed sound. But as I turn that up, it mixes in more and more compression. So this is like a wet, dry mix on the compression. So here's it just dry, and here is wet. And you can balance that however works best for your mix for your song. So that's the sub bass preset, and the sub bass 2 preset is all the same parameters. It's just there's a difference in the actual how I made it. Now the next bass preset I'm going to take a look at is BL1, and this is definitely the most simple of the bass stab presets. And the difference between the alternate version and the original version is the alternate version is sustained, because as I was playing with the original one, I thought some of these sounds could make pretty cool leads, so I wanted to include that just if anyone wants to have some leads made with this preset. So you can hear if I hold down a key, it decays to silence, but if I hold down this one, it does not decay. So that's the difference between these two. Aside from that, it's all the same. So similar to the sub bass presets, this one is pretty straightforward, I think. All of these knobs here, the Os 1, 2, 3, and so on, are all the level of the individual oscillators that make up the sound. So if I turn all of these down, you're pretty much not going to get a sound. But as I turn them up, you'll hear the sound start to come through. And so you can adjust these to create a decent amount of different types of sounds. So yeah, that's what those do. Then you have reverb amount, which is just the amount of reverb. So you can turn it all the way off, or you can have it at quite a lot of reverb, or somewhere in between. The decay is just the decay time. And there's an EQ on this, and you can turn it off if you turn this all the way down, or you can turn it back on by turning it all the way up. So that's just there if you prefer it with that EQ on, or if you prefer it with it off. And then you have some distortion settings. You have distortion preamp, which is how much of that sound is going into the distortion before the distortion is applied. Distortion threshold is just the distortion threshold. And then distortion mix is just the distortion mix. So all the way down there's no distortion, but as you turn it up there will be more distortion mixed in. So you can have some nice cleaner sounds, or some fuzzier, distorted sounds, which is pretty cool. And then finally there's the output level, which allows you to reduce the level or increase it if you need to, prior to it going into the mixer. So now I'm going to take a look at BL2. So the difference between BL2 and BL2 Alt is just this very subtle pitch envelope. So for BL2, it has that pitch envelope, but for the alternate version, that envelope is turned off. So aside from that, they are exactly the same. Okay, so for BL2, you kind of have two parts, and all of these modulators affect them the same. It's just they have quite a different character. So you'll hear part A versus part B. So you can't really adjust them independently from each other aside from their level. And then you do have a part B filter cut that you can adjust. So you can hear the difference between part A and part B. And the character of each is affected by these, mod 1 through 4. And these are the modulators. So if I go into the map and Citrus, they're actually, the levels of these different modulators. But you see there's just 1, 2, 3, 4. And so those really determine the character of the sound. Now when they're in the middle, so if I middle click them to reset, or just right click and reset, they're in the middle, and that is at no modulation. So it's a little bit different. Usually you might expect all the way to the left to be no modulation, but it's actually the middle, because there's positive modulation and then negative. So these are all modulators, and you can hear how it affects part A, mod 1, and then how it affects part B. So yeah, each of these modulators kind of bring a different character to the sound. And of course they can kind of combine and work together. To create more and more unique sounds. So this is a huge part of the character defining, is how you set up these modulators. But then you do also have a few more options as well. So you have a few distortion settings here. So you have the preamp, which is inverted, which means when it's all the way to the left, it's at the full amount of preamp. But as you turn it to the right, it turns that preamp level down. Then you have the distortion mix. And so you can use, the preamp and the mix together. To get different kind of sounds. And then post distortion sustain it's the sustain that happens after the distortion. So you can hear if I turn that on quite a bit. The bass can get quite long. But if you turn that down, it doesn't sustain as much. And that affects it even with the distortion mix off. You can hear the sub bass stays around, but with that down, the sub bass is taken away more quickly. So in addition to these parameters, you have unison, and this is the unison order. So if I turn that all the way down, there's no unison. And you can hear there's no stereo width to it now. But as I turn that up, it adds more voices. So that's 2 voices, and then it goes up to 9 voices because that's the maximum that Sytrus has. And then you have an attack and a decay. So you can hear that the attack is very much tied to that modulation, and not as much the sub. But the decay is tied to the sub. So you can use those together to, get it to last as long and sound pretty much how you want it to. And then you have a pitch LFO, which will sound better with part B. And the pitch LFO is just a pitch LFO, but you can see it says bipolar, which means similar to the modulators, it's in the middle is off, and then you can add LFO positively, or you can add it negatively. So again, the middle is off for that. And finally, you have the output level, which is just the final output level. So now I'm going to take a look at BL3. And this one has 2 alternate versions, but for BL3, the original version, you can see that operator 2 and operator 3 are square waves. But in the alternate version, those are saw waves, and then in the alternate 2 version, those are sine waves. So it's a subtle difference between these two, and it's a more notable difference with the last one. So I'll play those so you can just hear that. So that's the difference, but aside from that, everything, the parameters are all the same. But it does cause quite a difference in the sound. So just like with the previous preset, you can see, mod 1 level, mod 2 level, mod 3 level, mod 4 level. And these all work the same way. So if you, reset them, it turns them off, and being at 50%, is completely off. And then you can turn them up or down. To adjust the character of the sound. So Mod 4 is a little bit different than the others. Because you are able to adjust the attack and the pitch separately. So if I turn this up, you can hear it really just adds kind of a click to the sound. But you can turn the attack up and it will become longer. And so what's cool about this is, if you keep the attack down, it adds some more punch to the beginning of the sound. But if you turn it up, you can adjust the pitch so that it is inharmonic with the rest of the sound. And this allows you to create kind of more bell-ish sounding, bass stab. Or you can turn it up quite a bit. And then it almost creates like a bit crushing type effect. Especially if you have other modulators going on. You can hear it kind of has that talking bit crusher effect. Or it can just be, inharmonic bell-ish sound. So I think that's pretty cool. And then the next parameter you have over here is noise mute. So if it's all the way to the right, that means the noise mute is 100% on. But if you turn it to the left, you'll hear that some noise comes in. And this is more used on the BL3 or BL3 Alt than it is Alt 2. Just to add some extra noise on the top of that sound. So it's not as useful for BL3 Alt 2. So then you have mods pitch, and this controls the pitch of these three mods. This one you control the pitch separately. So you can lower the pitch of these modulators by an octave. So this is the lowest octave. In the middle is the middle octave. And then up here is the highest octave. So you can adjust these mods to be one of 3 octaves. So the next parameter is pluck duration, and that's just the duration of the pluck, or the stab, or whatever you want to call it. And then you have vibrato amount, which is the amount of vibrato. Again, it's in the middle is 0% vibrato. It's a pitch LFO, and so the middle is the LFO off. But if you turn it up, it has the maximum amount. And it's pretty subtle. But if you turn it down, then it's the maximum amount negatively. And then the middle is no vibrato. And then you have unison order, unison pitch, and unison phase. So this allows you to control the different unison parameters like pitch, phase, and then order, which is the number of voices in the unison. And all the way down turns the unison off. So yeah, those are the different unison options you have on here. And then you have a few distortion options, preamp, distortion mix, and post distortion sustain, which works the same as it does on the previous preset. It even affects it without the distortion mix on. So yeah, the preamp is the same as it has been. And then distortion mix just mixes that distortion in. And finally, you have the output level, which just controls the final output level. And finally, for the bass stab presets, the Patcher bass stab presets, I'm going to take a look at BL4 and BL4 Alt. So one thing I want to mention right away is there is a mixer track preset, which is BL4 mixer, and you can put that on a mixer track that this is routed through and see if you like how it sounds, or you can just mix it yourself. But it's something that I had on it after I made it that I thought made it sound pretty good. So yeah, I thought I'd just point that out. So this bass stab preset actually has 3 control panels. It has global, part A, and part B. So it actually has 2 parts. If I open up the map, you can see it has 2 Citrus presets. And one is part A, one is part B. And you can adjust the levels of part A or part B independently. And you can see that the parameters for them are very similar. They share all the same parameters, except for, main pitch, the other knob, and this knob and that knob. Those are the only differences. Everything else is the same. So I'm only really going to take a look in depth at one of the parts, which will be part B. And then I will explain, the small difference there. And of course, I'll show the global settings. So the first thing I want to take a look at actually is the vibrato frequency and the vibrato amount. So if I play the sound, you can hear that there's kind of a pretty present and quick vibrato on it. And that's what that controls, the frequency of that vibrato. And you can turn it up enough that it ends up becoming FM synthesis, rather than a vibrato really. And also vibrato amount is just the amount of that vibrato. So you can really hear how it affects the sound there. And the reason I wanted to take a look at this first is because this is the difference between BL4 and the alternate version. So if I copy these same settings, and paste them onto the alternate version, you can hear the difference between the sounds. As I play higher pitches with the alternate version, you can hear that the this FM synthesis or this vibrato increases in frequency with the pitch of the sound. But in just the original version, that doesn't happen. This is not related to the pitch you play. It's just a static frequency. So you can really hear, in the low notes it sounds very similar, but as you get higher, it will sound differently. So I did just want to show that. And I kind of like the alternate version a little bit better because of that. Because you can really use this in the character of the sound. And as you play different notes, it will, because the frequency is relative to the note played, it will keep its character as you play the different notes. Whereas this one, the character will change as you play different notes. So yeah, I kind of prefer this one, but it's definitely, the other one has its purpose as well. So yeah, that's what the vibrato frequency and the vibrato amount do. And as you can hear, it can actually turn into pretty much FM synthesis and affect the character of the sound rather than being just a vibrato. So yeah. And then just like the previous presets, it's the same thing here. Up 1, up 2, up 3, up 5 level. The middle is with them off. Let me go ahead and actually mute part A. And then I can turn them on. Either by going up or by going down. So, just the middle is off again, and you can adjust the balance of these to get this kind of sounds you want. And it's the same thing in part A, it just will sound differently. And then the attack is just the duration of the attack. Main pitch is the overall pitch of this. And you have 3 octaves. You have a low octave, a middle one, and a high one. So the main pitch is not on part A. It's only on part B, and that's because part B makes up more of the mid-range character, and part A kind of makes up more of the bass character. So, you can pitch this up to have different mid-range characters. Now, the other knob, which is what it's called, this is tied to one of the filter types on the part B citrus. So you can hear it'll change subtly if I turn it up. Kind of what frequencies are filtered, and I can also turn that off and it will introduce a lot more high frequencies. So that kind of relates to a filter. And the other knob is actually the same as that knob on part A. So this is related to a filter type on the part A citrus preset. So that knob and the other knob are the same, it's just therefore the different part A versus part B. And then you do have distortion, preamp, distortion mix. Yeah, that's just preamp and mix, it's the same as the other ones. And then you do have a few filter settings. So filter pluck amount determines how much the filter plucks, how high it comes from. And you can hear if I turn it down, it starts very low. The filter res is the filter resonance. Filter attack is the attack time of the filter. Filter cut is the starting cutoff. And then filter mode, adjust the filter mode. So you can turn the filter off by turning it all the way to the left, or by turning it up. It will take on a slightly different character as it goes through the different filter modes. And finally, you have the output level, which just determines the output level of part B. So part A, pretty much all the parameters are the same except for this knob. And you can hear that this knob kind of affects the stereo presence on that sound. As I turn it up or down, it sounds different in the stereo field. But other than that, all these parameters are the same. They just, they'll sound different because the preset is created different. And there's no main pitch, and that knob is equivalent to the other knob on part B. But everything else is the same. So finally, you have a few global settings. You have the global output, which is the final output. And then you have some distortion settings that both sounds can pass through together. So, the distortion, so you have the distortion preamp, distortion mix, and threshold, and distortion type. So that's how this preset works. This one has a huge variety of sounds that it's capable of, just because it has two parts that you can affect independently. So that's how all of these Patcher bass stab presets work. The ones that come with the FL Studio Bass Stabs pack. Again, if you're interested in this pack, link will be in the description. And if you do choose to grab it, I really appreciate your support.